Like most young boys growing up in Cedar City, I had chores to do that had to be done every day. Dad would drop me off at the farm on his way to work in the mornings and would pick me up at the end of the day, expecting the farm work to be done. If it wasn't completed, I sure needed a good excuse as to why. The farm equipment always seemed to break down, so it was up to me to figure out how it worked and how to fix it. Learning how to work hard and how to fix things and make them work made things a little easier when I joined the United States Army. In 1950, the United States joined the Korean conflict. The U.S. 24th Infantry Division was the first unit in Korea. National Guard units were activated, and Southern Utah's Triple Deuce responded, sending 2,000 men. Some of those 2,000 men were in the midst of some of the heaviest fighting for more than 3 years. However, all of them returned with nothing more than minor injuries. After I graduated from high school in 1951, Southern Utah Power asked me if I would come work for them. But in 1952, my name was near the top of the draft list, and I knew I would shortly be called up. So a guy I knew from high school was next on the list and was about to have his first child. I enlisted and took his place so he could have a chance to see the birth of his baby. I was given a bus ticket to Salt Lake City, and on November 18, 1952, I was sworn in at Fort Douglas. From there, I was shipped to Fort Ord in California for basic training. I had never been away from home for any length of time and was quite homesick. Having been raised on homegrown meat and potatoes, the chow was the hardest thing to get used to. I had to just eat what was served without complaint, but would never eat Spam again in my life. Basic was hard, but I survived by telling myself that if the others could do it, so could I. I realized later in life that I learned many valuable lessons during Basic. Discipline was one of those lessons, but one time through Basic was more than enough. I was assigned to the 26th Signal Battalion, and after basic training, I was sent to the base at San Luis Obispo in California for specialized training. On the first day, the instructor asked if anyone could climb a telephone pole. I was the only one to raise my hand. So, I was promoted to instructor and spent the next 9 months teaching others how to build communication lines. It wasn't always easy teaching men my own age how to do something that they didn't really want to do in the first place. One man was afraid to climb poles, so I tried to convince him that he couldn't get hurt. One day I told him, "Go ahead and climb as high as you dare and I'll jump off from that height." He climbed higher than I thought he would. And then, after needing to help him climb down, I climbed up and jumped from that height. I walked away, but had to spend the next few days in sick bay nursing sprained arches. In October of 1953, I was given orders to join my unit in Korea and shipped out of San Francisco the 1st of December. I was made sergeant of the guard for the trip. We encountered heavy seas during the trip and we all got seasick. Later, whenever I would see a commercial for a cruise, I would tell Anne, "I've been on 2 of those, don't want to ever go on another one again." When we crossed the international date line on the 180th meridian, the sailors on the ship had a big party for the GIs on board who were crossing the meridian for the first time. They presented each of us with a certificate from the domain of the Golden Dragon, signed by Davy Jones himself. It was a good time for all of us. We docked in Inchon, Korea on New Year's Day, 1954. The first thing we noticed was all the kids who crowded the shores and rowed out to the ships in small boats to beg for money or goodies from the gullible GIs fresh from the United States. I would later learn that these kids made a pretty good living doing this, and that it was the kids who lived inland that had a hard time. I would hire kids when possible to help with our work, doing my best to help those who needed it. The fighting had ended in July of 1953, and the demilitarized zone was formed on the 38th parallel. The Korean Military Advisory Board, or K.M.A.G, set up headquarters in Pusan near the D.M.X, and I was assigned as the head electrician for the camp and promoted to corporal. I had some experience helping Dad wire homes, but that mostly consisted of crawling into attic spaces too small for him to fit into. Along with 1 year working at Southern Utah Power gave me more experience than anyone else had. The camp was just being built when I arrived in Korea, so with the little experience I had, it was a tall order to build the entire electrical system for the whole camp. With only 2 generators for power, it was impossible to supply power to everyone all at once. The commander and the mess had first priority, so if the commander was entertaining, the rest of the camp went without power. We had 2 major problems that kept coming up. First, finding parts for the generators was next to impossible. So we did whatever we could to keep them running. Baling wire and electrical tape became one of our favorite sayings. Second, we had to keep a close eye out for Korean laundrymen who would tap into the lines to steal power to run their laundry businesses. It was a challenge to keep them from ruining the commander's parties. A few months after I arrived in Korea, the military shipped a herd of cattle in from the U.S. The question was asked if anyone knew how to brand cattle. Me and 2 others raised our hands, and there we were trying to teach Koreans how to brand cattle. We soon realized that the Koreans would rather watch us show off our Western skills than do the work themselves. In August of 1954, I received a call from a good friend of mine, Austin Munson, who was stationed in Seoul. He asked if I knew I was listed as AWOL. He told me I was supposed to report to Seoul a week ago for duty. I went to see the commander and he begged me to stay at K.M.A.G. He even offered to promote me to sergeant. But wanting to get back to Utah, I declined and was sent to Seoul, and Seoul was just one step closer to home. Arriving in Seoul, I was grateful to see so many familiar faces from southern Utah. One day, Doug Maxwell and I went looking for the LDS church and ran into a couple of guys from Beaver, Kent Myers and Gilbert Yardley. What a great surprise it was to see some familiar faces. The last 6 weeks of duty, I was assigned to drive Jeep for officers. This gave me a considerable amount of free time, so I spent a lot of that time flying with a friend of mine, Jessie Burnside, from Fountain Green, Utah. Jessie was with the paratroopers, and they were often off making daily supply drops. I shipped out for Seattle, Washington in October of 1954, and was given my honorable discharge at the camp there. We had tickets to fly back to Salt Lake City, but the fog had grounded all flights. So Ann and I and a few friends from Cedar rented a car and drove straight through. I was glad to be home, but will never forget my service in the Army or my time in Korea.